lawmakers are getting out of town, which means they get to hear directly from their constituents as Democrats hope to gain ground with swing district voters while shoring up their own problems with their base. Joining us now, Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona. So you, Senator, are out holding town halls with voters, not only in Arizona. Interestingly, you held one in Warren, Michigan Friday night. A new poll from the Wall Street Journal shows that your party, the Democrats, are at your lowest approval rating in 35 years. 63% of those voters, say they held an unfavorable view of the Democratic Party. So what are you hearing from voters, and why do you think your party is struggling so much?
Well, first of all, Jake, thank you for having me on, and we have to fix this. I don't put a ton of stock into, polls, especially this far away from an election, but we certainly do have a problem, and it's a messaging problem. And it's important to get out there and talk to people about the issues that they care about. So I was outside of Detroit there in Warren talking to folks who don't get to hear from their member of Congress, a guy named John James. He doesn't explain to them what happened in this big bill that the president and House and Senate Republicans passed. And it's really a bad deal for the American people. So myself and my wife, Gabby, sat there in front of a large group and took some questions from them and tried to explain to them, what's going to happen to Medicaid, what's going to happen to food assistance through SNAP. And there were folks here that I got the sense that these programs directly are going to affect them and their family members. And they do deserve an explanation from somebody in the United States Congress. And if their representative isn't going to do it, I'm going to go there. And hopefully in time, the American people will understand that we are out there fighting for them.
So you talk about how the Democratic Party has a communications problem. Your party, the Democratic Party, posted on Twitter or X in the last few days a chart that showed the price of groceries skyrocketing. The White House took that Democratic chart and accurately reposted it to show that most of the price jumps in that graph happened under the Biden administration. The Democrats then deleted the post. So I wonder if you think Democrats have figured out their problems, both in terms of communications and also acknowledging that Biden-era inflation, for example, is one of the reasons why your party is out of power.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There was inflation during the Biden administration. I track this pretty closely. I know what, ground beef and eggs and milk costs at the Safeway, where Gabby and I shop in Tucson, Arizona. They went up during the Biden administration. They went up some more. You're going to see prices go up and down. But I think what's important for the American people to know is that Donald Trump's tariff policy is very likely to increase costs. Going to take some time because of supply chains, stuff coming from, in some cases from all over the planet. And his trade policy, for my constituents in Arizona, there are a lot of products that come across the southern border, agricultural products that create thousands and thousands of jobs, not only in Arizona, but in the state of Texas. And we are facing right now some significant job loss. So when you think inflation's a problem for a family, somebody losing a job is even a bigger problem. And we're trying to figure out how we navigate that with this administration. I've spoken to the Secretary of Commerce about some of these tariffs, and we haven't gotten the response that we need.
Let me ask you about a big international issue, the starvation crisis in Gaza, a man-made crisis. Overnight, the government of Israel said they will begin to open additional humanitarian corridors for the purpose of getting additional aid into Gaza. We've obviously been seeing these horrific images of Palestinian children starving and suffering from malnutrition. I know you've been in close contact with Cindy McCain, the head of the UN World Food Program, who obviously is from Arizona. What is Cindy McCain telling you about the situation in Gaza? And are you satisfied with the latest news from Israel? And what do you think the United States should be doing?
Yeah, well, I talk to or text with Cindy, who is the head of the World Food Program, weekly. Even just this morning, I was sharing some information with her that we received from the Israeli embassy in Washington about what they plan to do. So I'm trying to help with the communication here. She's under a tremendous amount, her organization, a tremendous amount of stress and just kind of dislocation of the resources that she had. The rescissions package that you mentioned with Russ Vought, cut money for UNICEF. The DOGE cuts cut somewhere around 40% of Cindy McCain's budget at the World Food Program. So weekly, she's trying to figure out where does she put resources to keep children alive. It is a horrible situation, and we should never see this kind of starvation across the planet for anybody, but to see it see kids starving. I've seen this personally in the DRC when I would travel there with Gabby about a decade ago. It is a horrific thing to see, and we have to do better. Her challenge is she often can't get the aid into Gaza. Now, the Israeli government says they're going to have this like temporary ceasefire to try to move more aid in. Aid needs to be continuous. It can't be just a one-time thing. They're going to drop some aid from airplanes, but we need to have a continuous supply of food into Gaza, or these children are going to starve to death.
Reuters is reporting that 20% of employees at NASA, around 4,000 individuals, are set to depart the agency through the Trump administration's deferred resignation program. You are, if people don't know, a retired astronaut. What goes through your mind when you hear that?
Well, it's some of the best people that NASA has, and NASA is tasked with doing some really hard things that benefit our country, our national security, our economy, that really grows our economy, great paying jobs. We build industries through the investment in science, including with NASA. And the president is undercutting his own programs. In 2017, he started a program to take American astronauts back to the moon, to put them there permanently, to grow an economy on the surface of the moon. And now his own budget undercuts those efforts. I was with Sean Duffy, who's going to be the temporary NASA administrator, just last week, and we talked about where should NASA be going and how do you actually achieve the goals that this president set in his first administration. He's got an opportunity here. He can fund these programs, they can be successful, he can claim and take a victory lap maybe at the end of his administration, or he could let NASA, just kind of die along with other science that only the United States has been able to do. Some other nation isn't going to pick up the kind of scientific research that we do at places like the Jet Propulsion Laboratory or the NIH and universities. So I'm really disappointed to see these cuts. I've got a friend of mine, by the way, a guy I flew in space with, one of my crew members for my last mission in 2011. He's going to launch in space Thursday. So I'm hoping to be down there to see him make one final trip into space. And it's one of the things I think that really makes our country great.
I'm going to give you a yes or no question here, Senator, because we're completely out of time. Okay? I know it's challenging for a senator. Is it fair to say you did a town hall in Michigan and you're coming to us from Pennsylvania, both of them key battleground states? Yes or no, are you considering running for president in 2028?
That is a good question. I know you want a yes or no answer. I'm trying to do, and I'm not going to give you a yes or no one, because I'm just trying to do this job, get the word out to the American people. And I'm trying to improve, the polling that you talked about. And just listen to voters wherever they are about, what are the problems they're dealing with and how do we fix them.
Okay, well, I'll just observe that if anybody asked me that, I'd say no, I'm not running for president. Anyway, Senator Kelly, good to see you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.